Hey everyone, I'm Nidoking, and there's been some recent interest in Minesweeper lately, particularly thanks to Oren-chan playing Demon Crawl. So I figured I wanted to make this video to go over some Minesweeper strategies that I use, hopefully help you play Minesweeper better for yourself, and also to show off this No Stress Mines Minesweeper clone that I've got up on Opera GX. If you have the Opera GX browser, you can play it for yourself. There will be a link in the description. And in the meantime, let's just get into it. If you're not familiar with Minesweeper, there are probably better ways to learn about it than this, but I've got a 10x10 grid of squares here. 100 squares, 25 of them have mines in them, and I can left-click on any square to reveal its contents. If I reveal a mine, then I lose. The idea is to open every square that doesn't have a mine, and I can also right-click on squares to flag them as suspected mines, which will guide both the game and me to completing the puzzle. This particular version also has a number of trainers and options up in the corner to help, and I've got an experimental feature that I'm still working on. There are a lot of improvements I need to make, where I can mark squares in different colors, which I think will help me illustrate the strategies that I'm going to be talking about. So let's go ahead, reveal some squares, and get right into the game. The strategy of Minesweeper is pretty much all about counting. That's really all you've got to do is be able to count. So, for example, each number here tells me how many mines are in the surrounding squares. And I've got the trainers up here in the corner that will help me visualize when certain conditions are met. For example, there's a 1 here that can only see one other square that hasn't already been exposed. Right here. It needs to have one mine next to it, and there's only one square for there to be a mine in. So if I turn on the fillable trainer, that number will appear in blue. That tells me that there's only one possible place for a mine to go. So I can right-click on the number, and it fills that square with a mine. There's a 3 here that I can also fill because it has only 3 squares next to it. And now this 3 has 3 mines that are marked next to it, so I know that any other squares should be safe to open. And that's what the filled trainer here is for. Those numbers in green have the correct number of mines next to them, so assuming that my flags are correct, I should be able to open all of the remaining squares next to those. So I can just click on the number, and it opens up. This 1 is next to a single mine, and this 2 is next to 2 mines. So there we go. All of the available squares where I'm guaranteed the correct number of mines are there have been taken care of. There are no more green or blue numbers available. The last of the trainers that I've got is this Overfill Trainer. And this is one that I would recommend that even more experienced players might want to turn on if they want to have a more casual experience with the game. This means that if I were to mark too many mines next to a square, this 1, for example, turns red because I've got 2 flags next to it. They can't possibly both be mines, and therefore I must have made a mistake somewhere. But I'm not going to go for that right now. I'm going to get more into the actual logic behind the game and show you the other main application of counting. It's not always just knowing that every square must have a mine or every square must be empty. Sometimes you have to look at the overlap between the areas covered by 2 different numbers. Let me show you what I mean. Next to this 1, we have 2 squares that I've marked in red. And then in green, I'll mark the squares next to this number 2. Now, the colors may be a little hard to see, but you'll notice that both of the red squares are also green. The 1 is contained entirely within the 2. So we know that there must be 1 mine total in the red area, and 2 mines total in the green area. Well, with 2 mines to place into 3 spaces, only 1 space will be empty. And it can't be this green space here. If this green space were empty, both of the red spaces would need to have mines, but there's only 1 mine between those 2 spaces. So, with that overlap in mind, we know that this green square here must be a mine, because there's only 1 mine in all of the other spaces that the 2 sees. The second mine has to be here. That's a guarantee. And that gives us a little bit more information. Now, we don't know which of these 2 spaces has a mine in it. We're going to have to do additional logic in order to figure that out. But by marking this mine, we've got more information than we had before. So another place where I see I've got a little bit of an overlap, this 2 sees 2 spaces, but it's already got 1 mine next to it. We only need 1 more. This 4 has 2 mines next to it, so it needs 2 mines in this green area. And again, we have 1 mine in red, but 2 mines in green. So this green space that isn't also colored red has to be a mine. There's absolutely no question. But at this point, I'm kind of stuck. I don't see any more progress that I can make here. So I'm going to click the logic button, and behind the scenes, the game is also keeping an eye on what information I have and where I should be able to figure out the contents of any squares. It would color squares in yellow if there were any that I should be able to figure out. But the game agrees with me. We can't make any progress here. In a normal Minesweeper game, you would have to guess at this point. Just pick a square somewhere, click on it, and hope for the best. But No Stress Minesweeper gives you an extra helping hand in this case. This guess button lets me say, I believe that I have to guess. I don't want to guess. So if I'm correct, and there's no way to make progress without guessing, the game will give me a tile for free. And it'll specifically give me a tile with the lowest possible number. So in this case, I'm almost guaranteed to get a 0, unless every space in the puzzle is next to at least 1 mine. Now, if I had marked any flags incorrectly, or if my logic were incorrect and there were some space where I could guarantee to find either a mine or an empty tile, then I would lose the puzzle. But that didn't happen here. It gave me a bit of extra information, with which I'm going to have to try to make some progress here. Now again, we've got a 1 up against the wall and a 2 next to it. So if we look at the overlap the same way that we did before, we see that this tile is going to have a mine in it. And now this 3 has a mine next to it, and it is again next to a 1. But I can't really make any deductions here, at least not that I can see. I know that there's 1 mine between these 2 red tiles, which leaves exactly 1 mine between these 2 green tiles. But I still don't know which is which. It's a 50-50 proposition, and 50-50 is not certain enough for my purposes. No Stress Mines agrees, there's no progress I can make, so it's another guess. And here we've got a 2 that I can automatically fill in. And again, we've got a 1 next to a 2 with a wall on the other side. So this third space is going to have to be a mine. And the 3 now has 3 mines next to it. So I can just left and right click all of the green numbers until we reach this position. Now I have to think a bit more, we still don't know between these two tiles which one is a mine and which one is empty. But we're starting to get a little more information. This 3 here is eventually, hopefully, going to disambiguate that. Let's see what else we can do. Aha! So here's a 3 with 2 mines next to it. It needs one more mine between these two positions. Now this 2 also has a mine here, so it needs 1 mine, and it covers 5 squares. But we know that there's a mine in one of the 2 red squares, so these 3 green squares must be empty. If we put a mine into any one of them, we won't be able to put a mine in the red square, and this 3 can't be filled. So all 3 of those squares are known to be empty. And now we've got a 2, which has 2 mines next to it, and a 3, which has only 3 spaces where mines could be. And that fills the 2 and the 3 over here. All right. So again, we've got a 1 up against the wall with a 2 on the other side. The 3rd space must be a mine. And all of these 3s are interesting. These 2 are each bordering 2 mines. And they do have an overlap, but I don't think I can guarantee that any of those spaces are mines or empty, because there's 2 spaces in the overlap. We could have a mine in one of those that would fill both 3s, or we could have a mine here to fill this 3, and a mine here to fill this 3. However, we do know that there is 1 mine within these 3 red spaces, and that mine is also going to be next to this 3, which already has 2 mines next to it. So the 4 green spaces have 1 mine, and the 3 red spaces have 1 mine. So this 4th green space that isn't also red must be empty. And now we can use this 3 to tell us there's a mine there, and that fills in most of this region up here. We again have ambiguity between these 2 squares, but hopefully we'll be able to make our way in there as we go along. So let's see. I do notice that this 3 needs only 1 mine between all of these spaces. And if you remember way back when, I looked at the overlap between this 3 and this 1. Apologies that the colors are very messy. This seemed like the best way to do it so that it wasn't just colors and that you do have the directions of the lines to help you disambiguate. But these 2 squares next to the 1 have 1 mine between them. And this 3 needs 1 additional mine, which has to be in one of these 2 green squares. So we know that there's 1 mine between the 2 green squares, and this 3 has 1 mine in all 4 of the red squares. So there's a big chain of logic here, placing 1 mine here in these 2 squares and 1 mine in these 2 squares, telling me that both of these squares that are only red are empty. And now we can actually disambiguate both of these 2 dominoes over here. They were previously completely 50-50, but we know that there's a mine here, which means this space is empty, this one has a mine, and that one's empty. And in the same way, hopefully we'll be able to fill in one of these squares up here, and then get our answer for these squares up here, without having to use the guess feature again. Although, it's there if I need it. And again, this 3 tells us that there's a mine in one of these 2 spaces. So, there's also 2 mines in the blue spaces, which means that this space must have a mine in it. And with that done, once again, I don't see any way to make progress. But it is important at this point to pay attention to the number of mines remaining. I'm looking to add a mines remaining counter, but right now I just have the number of flags and the total number of mines. So there are 6 mines that I haven't placed. One of them is in those 2 spaces. One of them is in those 2. One of them is in those 2. Then there are a couple of other regions. I know that there's 1 mine in one of those 2 spaces. And I know that there's 1 mine in one of those 2 spaces. But unfortunately, that doesn't tell me how many actual mines there are. If I had counted 6 total mines, then I would know that all of the remaining spaces were empty. But this could be as few as 4 mines. If we have one here, and we have one here. Or it could be 5 mines, if we've got one here, and one here. So the information we have isn't quite enough to tell us exactly where the remaining mines are. So I believe I'm going to have to guess again. And this is big. This is very big. Because again, I still have this blue striped region where I know there's exactly 1 mine, and that will be the 1 mine that's next to this number 1. So all 3 of the other spaces around this 1 are empty. And now this 3 has 1 mine next to it, and we know that one of those 2 is a mine. So one of the remaining 2 must be a mine. But we already knew that because of this 3. Now here we've got a 1, and we know that we have 1 mine in those 2 squares, and this 3 already has 2 other mines. So the 3 also sees this square, which can't possibly have a mine. And I think that's probably going to crack the rest of the puzzle for us, because we've got a bunch of blue numbers, green numbers. And up here, we've cut into one of those 3 dominoes that we couldn't tell the difference between. And that solves the puzzle. So I'll go through one more a bit more quickly. I'm hoping to get something where at the end the logic of the number of mines remaining is going to help. It's possible that I'm not going to reach that point. Yeah, here's an important pattern, and again, I don't like memorizing the actual numbers. I like applying the overlap logic, but whenever you have 2 1s next to a wall, you know that 1 1 covers these 2 squares, and 1 1 covers these 3 squares. So there's 1 mine in the red, 1 mine in the green. The mine in the green can't possibly be in the square that isn't red, because then there'd be no place to put a mine in the red. So this square is empty. And up here again, we've got 2 1s. This square is empty. And we've got 2 mines next to this 2, and 3 mines next to the 3, which sees all the same squares as the 2, plus this one. The 1 extra square it sees has to be a mine. The rest of the squares I don't think we can say anything about just yet. Now, there's a bit of additional logic that I can do in saying that this 2 has 1 additional mine in these 3 red squares. This 2 has 1 mine in the red squares, as we just figured out, and 1 additional mine between the 3 green squares. So in Minesweeper, if I were just to make a guess, between these 2 squares, for example, it's 50-50. But each of these squares, I've got a 2 in 3 chance of being safe. So that's probably a better place to click if I just had to guess randomly. but No Stress Mines isn't going to make me guess randomly. And I don't think there's anything else that I can do with this puzzle. So now I've got lots more information to work with. Alright, so the puzzle doesn't quite solve itself. But I've got a nice overlap here between the 3 and the 2. They each need 1 additional mine, so it must be in the 2 red squares. This one is empty. And the 5 is only going to have 1 empty space around it. But it doesn't look like I'll be able to tell which one that is. Here again, I've got a 1 and a 2, which have a nice bit of overlap. The 1 has 1 mine in it. The 2 has 2 mines in it, which means that this space over here has to be a mine. And furthermore, this space has to be empty. Because if this one had a mine, I couldn't put a second one next to the 2. And that gives us room to fill in a few more spaces. And here again, it looks like it's a guess, because I've got a 50-50 here. This 5 we know has 1 empty space around it, but we don't know which one. And this 3 has 2 spaces. But let's look at non-overlapping regions. So here, we know that there's 1 mine still connected to this 3. That's in the red area. And we know that there are 3 mines connected to this 5. That's the green area. So between those 2 colored areas, there's a total of 4 mines. Well, 4 is the exact number of mines that we have left. Which means these 2 spaces that aren't colored are both empty. And so that should solve the rest of the puzzle for us. But it doesn't. Once again, I'm left with a couple of 50-50 choices. And this is the part where the expert Minesweeper player is tearing their hair out in frustration at the fact that they've got a 25% chance of solving this puzzle. Me? I just click the guess button. And there you have it. That's 2 puzzles solved with no mistakes. And hopefully you've learned some good techniques that you'll be able to apply to any Minesweeper variant you're playing. There may be some better strategies for guessing when you have to in games like Microsoft Minesweeper or Demon Crawl. I do kind of want to make a video on Demon Crawl at some point just to show you some of the more specific logic that applies to that game, as opposed to something like Minesweeper that's a lot more deterministic. But the same strategies for identifying squares that have mines and squares that are safe to click are going to carry to any Minesweeper version that you play. So I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I'll see you again for some more Minesweeper tips and tricks. Probably. Don't forget to check out No Stress Mines if you like what you saw.